For this topic on career coaching, I found an interesting definition and an interesting article, which again I'll link to in the show notes for this, from Harvard Business Review, called "Do You Need a Career Coach?" It was published last year, I think, so it's pretty new. And they sort of describe career coaches as providing a range of services, from helping to figure out what you want to do, to exploring opportunities for professional growth, to supporting you through the ups and downs of looking for a job. Again, they sort of went on to define it as when you may need one when you don't know what to do next. You aren't sure how to make your resume substantive and simple. That sounds like quite a technical, even directive thing, maybe. I don't know. You aren't over your old job when you move to transition into a new one. Maybe when you're interviewing but haven't landed the job you want yet, or you're not moving where you want to in your career. And the EMCC, I found some stuff there. They kind of add, a broad term of career development, but also improving performance and even maintaining work-life balance. And a quick Google will return, albeit mostly in the US, there's an institute for career coaching, and there's numerous online classes and certificates which specialize in this. So it's really carved out a niche in the coaching world. How would you describe career coaching in your experience, or in our experience, and what the benefits are?
I don't mind going first. This was my niche. This for many years. This was my area. But this is my definition. I'm thinking about my experience was very much about meaning and purpose. My career coaching was very much about those individuals that were looking for more depth, more meaning, more purpose. People didn't come to me that were looking to move within their organization. Often they were big career changes, very big career changes, very different. So that's my definition from my perspective and my experience. What was the second part of the question? The benefits?
The benefits, yeah.
Oh my God, the benefits. Finding meaning and purpose, right? And fulfillment. The benefits are just huge in terms of finding happiness, living life to the full, reaching full potential. Yeah.
And you've shared a bit about this before as well, Lou, and my sort of interpretation of it has just been that you work with clients who maybe are in a role that doesn't give them fulfillment. There's no meaning and purpose. It's been a job, versus it can be quite a life-changing thing. It's not just a work thing, it's a life-changing thing. Would that be right?
Yeah, I think so. And I attracted clients that were ready to make big career changes.
Yeah.
Often it was businesses, setting up businesses, charities, all sorts of different things. Really random stuff I have mentioned before. I don't want to necessarily go into that. But they were big things. And it was very exciting as a coach, actually, to work in that niche. Yeah.
Louise?
So I've done associate coaching for a company for career coaching, but it was very niched, as in it was that transition due to redundancies. So it was outplacement kind of. So it's that transition move from having a very stable, solid career, perhaps with the same organisation for 10, 12 years, and then no longer having a future there. And they were supported through that process. So it was quite specific in what it covered, which is another strand of career coaching, I guess, and was, I would hazard to say, slightly more directive and almost mentoring-ish in that zone, because there was a need. People were quite vulnerable, so you did lots of coaching around that kind of vulnerability and confidence and esteem and purpose and where next and direction and all that kind of stuff and fulfillment. But then there was also that kind of strand that says, so what are we going to do about it? What are our options? Where do we go now? So there was quite a lot of dynamic kind of movement and potentially a little bit more walking side by side with them as well through that part of the journey. So I enjoyed it. It felt quite purposeful in one sense, because there was a real kind of start, middle and end potentially to a lot of these journeys. So that was quite a privileged position to be in. So that was good. But I wouldn't say it was totally wholly what we might call coaching, but it absolutely served a purpose, I think, for people in that moment, definitely.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Just already the two examples you've got, Lou, you attracted those people who were ready for it, motivated, realized they needed the big change. And I've been around processes like what you've just described, Louise, as well, where it's thrust upon people, and they could have worked for an organization their whole life and never searched for a job. So there needs to be some input, doesn't there? You know, where do I even start with this job search, let alone what is the job search, and what, you know, how do I deal with my vulnerability that you've said? So that's a really interesting difference between the two examples so far. Ali, what's your experience of career coaching?
A bit of both, I'm going to say, in terms of elements of not necessarily, probably yes, major career changes, but people, and again, predominantly this has been within one organisation, but also I'm going to say then external from that organisation clients, but people who were looking for a change of role, weren't sure about their next steps. So again, there was some work around what motivated them, what did they, what was important to them around roles. Again, people who were being made redundant or thinking about, do I take redundancy, do I not, and what could those next steps look like. I personally had some coaching when I was thinking about taking voluntary redundancy from my role, someone who was external from the company, just to kind of almost sort of talk through what was going through my head and how I kind of felt, and I think that really helped me solidify what my decision was going to be, so I can see how it benefited me. I think that the beauty of, whatever form the discussion takes, of having career coaching with a coach, is that they are, or you are not. I think when you can have, let's say, development conversations with a line manager, or they have a bit of a vested interest in you, so they might want to keep you, they might want to get rid of you, so I think in that coaching space there is, there's no judgment from us, there's no direction from us. It's using questions or tools to help them come up with their own ideas. So I think that's where having a coaching around your career, I think, can really benefit, because you get, you're not getting anyone else's opinion on it. It's purely that space to kind of explore it. Whereas I think with the best will in the world, while some people are trying to remain impartial, you can often have a hidden agenda, and or necessarily wanting to put people down a path that may not be right for them, but you think it may be right for them. I think that's where there's a benefit can come with that.
Yeah, that's a really interesting one, that. And I've written down loads of words there of, objectivity, no baggage, no judgment, no agenda, just a space to think. I mean, that's coaching, isn't it? And it's in its purest form. But yeah, particularly if it's an internal thing. I'm going to come on to internal versus external coaches when it comes to this stuff, actually, in a bit. But I think that's a really interesting example. Just somebody who is impartial, who doesn't have any agenda to coach you through that career choice. It's I can imagine being pretty important, or I can see the pitfalls of potentially it being the other way around.
Before we go on, can I share one thing? I was had somebody that I was coaching, and it was kind of pre-pandemic, COVID, and then during, around career, and it was a really interesting to watch as a coach how their priorities and what was important to them changed because of the change in their working environment, from going to being in a space with people to working from home, and how that kind of impacted on actually what they had taken for granted in their job that then became more relevant. And I think potentially COVID has made people question a lot about career, work-life balance, job purpose, and all of that. So I think there's potentially a lot going on for people, and sometimes I think sometimes really exploring with careers the things that we maybe take for granted about because they're just there, that those hygiene factors, to kind of sometimes raising that awareness can kind of make a difference. Lou and I have talked about, how much we value working from home and the difference that it makes. And sometimes it's not until you maybe don't do it or you start doing it that you then appreciate, oh my gosh, why didn't I do this before? Or so I think sometimes it's important to just remind or use the space for them to explore what are aspects of their job that people maybe take for granted, but are the kind of the things that need to be there, but you don't think about them because they've already been there. And it's only when they disappear that you realise, oh my God.
And that just reminds me, some of the career coaching clients I had, in the exploratory stage of looking at what was out there, they realised what they'd got, and the goal then became, actually, I mean, I've got a really good thing going on here, and it helped them reframe and change their mindset, and ended up staying. It wasn't always a big life change or shift. Sometimes it was the absolute opposite. So it's just to pick up what you were saying, Ellie. It's very true. Yeah,
I agree. I think it's a really helpful point to think that it's not necessarily massive wholesale changes, is it? Often, so one of the first things that I'd do with a career coaching client was tell me about your best day and give me elements. So don't give me job titles, don't give me any kind of any organizational speak, but tell me about the interactions you're having, or the space that you're working in, or the kind of the content of the project that you're working on, and just describe your most brilliant day. And actually, it's all of those elements that we're looking for in our next job. So we don't focus on job titles, we don't even focus on maybe a sector or whatever. We actually focus on strengths, tapping into strengths. What gives me buzz? What gives me energy? Where am I contributing? Where do I feel resourceful and purposeful? All those kind of things. So that's a really good rift off that point, I think, and a really nice build, that lots of times it is about repositioning and reframing what's already within their gift to go after already, or it might already be in their back pocket, so to speak, just needs dusting off.
Yeah. Some really interesting examples, and it's made me reflect on when career coaching crops up for me. And for me personally, my practice, that hasn't been the reason for the coaching. That hasn't been my experience yet. Like Stephen, I'm considering my career, I'd like some support with it. That just hasn't been the clients I've attracted. But it has cropped up in a unexpected way. So actually, this person, in an organization, has been put forward for coaching. I don't know, trying to keep it general, but they're a senior person or talent, and they're getting some coaching to support them make the next step. And it's only through that coaching process that they realize, and you realize as the coach, they don't necessarily want this next step. And then it turns into a conversation about, well, what do you want? And then the conversation broadens around career. So that's how it's cropped up for me unexpectedly. That wasn't the purpose or reason or the goal set out at the beginning, but it shifted. So I guess it's kind of the reverse of what you said, Lou, that you were talking about, maybe they're thinking about change, but then they realize what they've got. It's almost the reverse of that for me. Do you know what I mean? That they realize what they've got, and they realize what the future looks like, and maybe they don't see themselves as part of it. And then it broadens into a career thing as well. So that's my experience of it. What sort of knowledge, skills, behaviors do you think we need to bring to a career coaching conversation that might differ from any other type of coaching conversation, do you think?
Oh, wow. I suppose, I don't know what I should say. I think it's helpful to have gone through a career change yourself, right? You've lived and breathed, you've walked the path. But then, having said that, as coaches, we don't have to have experienced something in order to help someone, right? I was in the position where I'd been through a big career change, and I felt passionate then about supporting others to do the same. That's how I found the niche. That's how I fell into the niche. That's how I attracted people, because they could see what I'd done, and therefore they were like, you know, she's been through it. It kind of gives you that credibility, I suppose, and influence if you've been through something yourself. But I don't know, it's a bit controversial, isn't it? Because I think as coaches, you don't have to have been through it. But for me, that was my experience, and that definitely helped. Yeah.
I think that's fair. It's quite a nuanced thing, isn't it? It's not that you've gone through it, so now I'm going to tell you what I did so you can repeat the process. It's not that, but it's what's made that you used the word passion. It's what makes you want to coach people, because you've experienced whatever the decision is, whether it's leaving your job and doing something else or staying where you are, reaching that point and that decision worked for you. Therefore, you're passionate about it. That's why you coach people through it.
I enjoyed that. I enjoyed the niche. That's really the summary of it. Yeah.
How about Ali and Louise? What do you think? Is there anything else that we need to bring as coaches that differs from any other type of coaching conversation when we're doing career stuff?
I learned loads when I did specifically career, big chunks of them, programs of them, big cohorts of them. So that change stuff, the change and transformation stuff that perhaps I wouldn't have focused on previously as a coach. So that was interesting. And there was some technical knowledge, skills for me as well. Actually, it was I was learning a lot and developing a lot, because I was being called upon to kind of provide a slightly different service. So that was quite interesting and challenging. And I hate to say it, and I'm kind of going with Lou on this a little bit, kind of, we shouldn't really have to know about it, but actually it was really helpful in some instances to have that shared experience. And even things like technical things, like knowing a bit more about LinkedIn and how to use it. And maybe I called upon my marketing qualification from literally 30 years ago, but rebranding and finding your own voice and positioning yourself. So actually, for me, I found there were a lot of kind of old strengths and skills and expertise that I kind of brought to fruition a little bit more in a slightly more directional way than I would have done with pure coaching. But do you know what? It kind of landed. It was needed. It was asked for, and it delivered some really good benefits for the client. So I'm not ashamed of it in that sense, because it provided it was filling a gap and a need that was very much there for people that at that time potentially were in turmoil, real limbo, real vulnerability, not really knowing where to go next and whatever. So hopefully it was a form of transitional coaching in that sense. So not strictly coaching, and definitely more technical and skills required. So that's what I found.
And I think it's just about being clear with that up front, isn't it, in the contract? And maybe even signaling when you're moving from one thing to the other. So, I'm going to step outside of just this non-directional version of me for a moment, because there's something here, some input that I think would be a benefit. I'm putting it there for discussion. Let's talk about it. But your contract's important in that perspective. Yeah, interesting. Sorry, Lou, you were going to say something.
I was just going to pick up on that point, Louise, because I found with career coaching that I needed the toolbox more than any other type of coaching. I had to build this sort of resource, again, being non-directive, but it was in the bank. And if they were thinking about values as a really typical example, there was something I could use potentially to help them. So I found my toolbox was very needed in this niche, more so than other niches that I've worked in.
I think that the final question I'd like to just to ask, because we have a lot of listeners who are internal coaches as well, and as well as external coaches. So do you think career coaching can be undertaken by both internal coaches and external coaches? Ali, I'll come to you first, if that's all right.
I'm going to say yes, because I've done it internally and externally. The caveat with internal is you've got to be there's no conflict of interest, as in you're not, it's not someone in the same department or something like that. So I think that would be my caveat for internal. the beauty, I guess, in some ways with internal, and it goes into stepping into, not going to say that mentoring role, but when you work internally, you could have the option of suggesting people for them to speak to find out more, specific people to find out more about it, or internal tools and resources that could be there. So again, where I worked, we had a mentoring bank, so you could pick a mentor in that area. So I think there's the opportunity to do that. I guess something having done internally where people could be supported doing things like psychometrics, because again, they would cost extra money to do. But again, it was working for an organisation that encouraged that and would support that. There's I guess going back to the bit that we were talking about before, I've used some of those in my coaching, which has helped play out. And I've used it in other aspects of coaching, but I've used it in career coaching, particularly around motivation. So I had somebody who was very motivated by security, but also motivated by change. And the two were conflicting each other because they liked the stability of a job, but they wanted something new and exciting. So that formed a good kind of discussion. But as I say, I think it can be done both ways. But my caveat for internal is just, making sure you hold those values as a coach of being non-directive and non-judgmental, and it being the person in front of you's agenda.
And and I guess it relates a bit to what you said earlier as well about the line manager coaching. There could be a conflict of interest. There needs to be a degree of separation. And, again, a similarity with all coaching, there needs to be trust as well as credibility, doesn't there? That actually this person isn't acting on behalf of the organisation here, they're acting on behalf of me and my career, regardless of what the outcome is. Yeah. Louise, anything you would add to that, this internal versus external coaching career debate?
I think you can. I think you can do both. I think you've got to be that impartial and confidential and all that kind of stuff. I suppose with external, I mean, that's where most of my experience lies, is there's permission to think big, isn't there? That there might be limitations potentially with internal coaching. I don't know. With external, there's no barriers or limitations. There might be a possibility to think bigger, outside the box, maybe. Yeah.
So I'm operating as an internal coach at the moment, aren't I? So although I don't have explicit career coaching conversations, I view a lot of the conversations, and we ultimately end up there, that actually a development and an improvement in line managers' satisfaction with their role, their competency within that role is a form of career coaching. Is good for the organisation, is good for the team, equips them and develops them so that they're ready potentially for whatever promotion or next step might be round the corner. So I think, listening to everyone, I wonder if there's an element of career coaching that kind of just happens anyway within many ordinary coaching sessions, because we're talking basically about development and growth, aren't we, really? The crux of it. So that's kind of what's occurred to me. So I definitely think internal coaches can do career coaching. Yes.
There we go. Full stop.
No better. There's no kind of, one's better than the other.
No, not at all.
They offer different things.
Just a slightly different context, isn't it? That's it. Brilliant. I mean, we started with meaning and purpose and fulfilment. We talked about when it's forced upon people as well, which is a really interesting one. But I guess, I think that's a great place to leave it, Louise, actually, that, of course, it's coaching, therefore it shares the same purpose and we need to bring the same thing as coaches. But it could be, what I'm hearing is, those opportunities where there is some input needed, and, it can be a mentoring as well as a coaching thing. But as long as we're clear about that in our contracting up front, and then that's all good. And if that's what the client signs up to, then happy days. Cool. Thank you very much.
Cheers.